Hey guys, it's Paul from Online Sax Academy. In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at two amazing sax players, Paul Desmond and Stan Getz, and what they do over autumn leaves. And both these transcription extracts of Paul Desmond and Stan Getz are available for both alto and tenor sax in a free PDF, and the link to that's down below. Now, Paul Desmond originally recorded this track on Chet Baker's 1974 album, She Was Good to Me. And if you're familiar with the tune Autumn Leaves, you may notice that they don't do it in the typical key that you would say play at a jam session. Now, along with these transposed scores for alto and tenor in the original key, premium members at Online Sax Academy will also be able to download these PDFs transposed into a more standard key that we would typically play Autumn Leaves at a jam session. And right now you can become a premium member with a 14-day trial. The link to that is down below. Alright, so let's check out the first couple of phrases. So straight away you can hear Paul Desmond's iconic tone with that very light articulation. So just taking a look at these first two phrases, you can see that there are no accidentals. We're playing purely what's known as diatonically, so there are no chromatic passing notes. But what that doesn't mean is that he's just wandering around an F major scale. For example, if we take the first phrase, the only note that isn't a chord tone, and when I say chord tone, for example on G minor 7, we mean the 1st, 3rd, 5th or 7th. In G minor, the chord tones are G, B flat, D and F, C7, C, E, G, B flat, and F major 7, F, A, C, E. With that in mind, you can see these three notes are chord tones of G minor. And then we're treating this E as part of this bar because it's held over, it's just on the and of 4, it's like anticipating the C7. And these notes here, we're on the C7 chord, we've got 3, 4, 5, 3. And of course ending on this long C on the F major chord, which is the 5th. Now this F on the C7 chord, if you were to hold that note, it could sound a little bit out of place. If I play it on its own, you can hear it's clashing with the 3rd of the chord, and we get that kind of flat 9 interval. But the reason why it works so well here is because the melody is so strong. We're moving up from a chord tone before and ending on a chord tone after, and it's moving in a stepwise motion. Now if we remove some of these markings, the other thing that makes this phrase so nice is the rhythm, particularly this anticipation here. So we're not playing on beat 1 here, we're anticipating into it and then playing just off it on the and of 1 here. We're also not starting the phrase right at the beginning of the measure, we're letting the chord settle and then coming in on the and of 2. So a really great exercise you can try is just take the rhythm of this phrase and start to change some of the notes, and you can keep it as like a chord tone exercise. So I'm going to play a phrase where I'm just playing the chord tones of each chord but with this rhythm. Or I could do something like this. Now check out this second phrase. He's using some of the ideas from the first phrase. First of all, we've got this rhythm of an 8th note to a quarter note. So in the first phrase we have ba-da, ba-da, and then we have the same thing here. So you've got that same rhythmical idea coming through, and then also the ending. Here we're stepping down G, E, C, and here the end of the phrase we're stepping down another major arpeggio. It's the B flat major arpeggio because we're on the B flat major chord. And again, if you look at the chord tones, we've got the 3rd of F major here, although you could think of that as an anticipation, the 7th of B flat major. Then a 3rd on the D. We've got that outside note 4, that's the sharp 11, going up to 5, 3, 1. So just like before where there was only one note that isn't a chord tone, we've got one note here that isn't a chord tone. And just like before, that note was part of a stepping up series. Here it was E, F, G. Here we've got it D, E, F. Everything's been shifted down by 1. And then to finish off this first A section, check out this final phrase. So again, a really melodic and elegant phrase that seems simple, but there's a lot going on in here. You can see we're starting on the and of 3. And starting your phrases off the beat is a great thing that you can practice. Here we're starting on the and of 2, here we're starting on the and of 4, anticipating into the B flat major chord, and here we're starting on the and of 3 of this A7 chord. Now again, in terms of note choices, it's mostly chord tones. We've only got 2 notes that are not a 1, 3, 5 or a 7. So on the A7 chord, we've got 5, 7, 5, and then we're moving to our D minor, 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 3. So altogether we've got this, 1, 2, 3. Notice how he's starting his phrase on a chord tone, he's ending his phrase on a chord tone, and he does that for all three of these first phrases. One final thing about this section is look at the space. We've got 4.5 beats of space here, 4 beats of space there. He's got a little bit of space at the beginning, and in between these phrases, it lets the phrases breathe. So you play something, take a little breath, and then play your next phrase, then take another breath. It allows the listener to kind of digest what they're hearing instead of being fired at with notes. All right, let's check out the next 8 bars. Alright, so first of all, you can see it's a little bit denser, so we're getting a few more notes kind of per bar, and there's also some chromatic passing notes coming in now, although not the typical kind of chromatic passing notes you'd see from more bot players. First of all, let's check out this phrase here. So we're starting with this more kind of scalic approach, so stepping up and stepping down. We've got, and then landing on the third of C7. That's what makes sense of this scaly run, is the fact that you land on the chord tone as the chord changes. You're landing on the third of C7. Then a nice melodic guideline you can follow is, you can see here he jumps up an octave to a high E, but then because he's done quite a big jump up, he steps down. So we've got this low E and then straight to the high E, stepping down before finishing on the third of F major. Now this idea of doubling up notes and particularly moving in a stepwise motion, that's a typical melodic device that you hear being used by players like Paul Desmond and Stan Getz. In fact, you'll hear them both do this kind of thing later on in this solo and in Stan Getz's. I think it's really effective because we get that forward momentum of the rhythm of constant eighth notes, but the pitch isn't changing every note because we're doubling up each one. So this can be a nice device you can play around with and see how you can use it. For example, we could take a phrase where say we're walking down a G minor and landing on the 5th of C7. But now if we double those up, it just gives you another character to the phrase. Then we have the phrase with the interesting chromatic passing notes. So what I think he's thinking here is if we take out these notes here of G sharp, C sharp and E, those form a C sharp minor triad, and you can see he resolves this onto a D. And so what I think we've got here is almost like a C sharp minor resolving up to a D minor. Of course, it's a B flat major 7 chord, really. Either way, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is these notes are quite tense. They are not from our F major chord at all. So they create a lot of tension. The way our ears make sense of that is we see where the resolution is. And because he's resolving to the third of B flat major 7, and that D is just a semitone above that really outside C sharp note, it resolves very easily. All right, let's clear off some of this so we can see what's going on rhythmically. Now, what we've got here are the first use of some triplets, and he really makes a feature of these triplets, and you'll see he's using the triplet every time on beat 4 and beat 4, and that's a kind of a rhythmical hook that he's using to make this sound so melodic. So this first one, we've got this, and then we've got, and then we've got. You can see how every time it's stepping up 3 before resolving down 1, and then again stepping up 3 before resolving down 1 onto this B flat, which of course is the 5th of our E half diminished chord. And then again we're going up 3 and then resolving onto, this is an F. Now you can think of this as, technically it's the what's known as the flat 13 of E7, or you can think of it as a raised 5th. It's a very common thing to do when you're on a minor 2-5-1. When you're on the dominant chord, instead of just playing 1, 3, 5, 7, you can raise that 5th up a semitone, and it creates almost like a stronger pull to the D minor. And so that's what's happening here, where we've got that, and then we're resolving to the D minor. All right, let's listen back one more time for the whole of this second A section. Now, he leaves lots of space to prepare us for the B section, or the second half of the tune really, and this is where we start with our minor 2-5-1. Now, check out this phrase here, and look at the similarity with the beginning of the second A section. Can you see how we're starting on the second, we're going up, coming down and landing on the third, which is a quarter note. And then what are we doing here? We're starting on the second, going up, coming down, all in stepwise motion before landing on the third of our A7 chord. And then later on you can see it's another device he uses again here. It's the same as the original one we had here, but now it's up an octave. So this clearly seems to be a definite piece of language that Paul Desmond uses. And you can take ideas like this and try putting them in all 12 keys or in a few other keys. And it doesn't have to be on Autumn Leaves. You can take a little piece of language like that and apply it to any tune that has 2-5-1s in it. But the general concept of using repetition or taking elements from previous ideas and reworking them or slightly changing them, but it still has that air of familiarity to it. That's what makes this solo sound so melodic. It's not just constant new information hitting you. Now this measure here is a classic piece of jazz language where we're starting on the third before going up to the flat 9 here and then stepping down, and it could have resolved down to the F, the third of D minor. Here he's gone up a step and resolved on the 5th of D minor. So we've got, but he could have gone down and gone. It's a typical phrase, and you'll hear bop players play very similar things like. And then here for this D minor chord, we've just got a really nice simple example of a pattern. Essentially, this is like playing what we call playing a scale in thirds. So we're starting on a note, we skip down, then we step back up, skip, step, skip. You get the idea. And then he's using a repeated rhythm of. And then because this is like a downward pattern, to balance that, we've got that nice movement up at the end. Now for this second line, you'll notice how this is so similar to the phrase we had here. It's essentially just up the octave. The only real difference is we double up the A's here. And really nice vibrato on that long A as well. Now moving into this final section, this phrase we get a little bit of a hint of the blues scale. So we've got this big leap from the high F to the A flat. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, what has this A flat got anything to do with an E half diminished chord? I mean, how does an A flat fit into that at all? When you just play it on its own, it just sounds like it's completely wrong. But the approach you want to take here is we're moving to D minor. This is a 2-5-1 in the overall key of D minor. And so all of these notes for this phrase come from our D minor blues scale. So essentially we're just playing across over the top of the changes in thinking more like melodically, horizontally in the overall key. We're not worried about playing every single individual chord change for this particular phrase. And so that's why even though some of these notes like the F on the E half diminished, the A flat on the E half diminished, they're not chord tones and they're quite tense, it still works because it's from a wider context of just playing overall in a bluesy way. And then this is a nice technique as well. This is one of the only places in the tune where the harmonic rhythm basically means the number of chords per bar is faster than normal. Normally it's just been one chord per bar, or we've had one chord held for 2 bars. But here we've got only half a measure for each chord. But over the top of that, what he's playing is just a repeated figure all the way through. So he's keeping stable whilst the chords are moving down beneath him. Yeah, check out the effect. And that can be a nice rule of thumb, which is when the chord changes are getting quite complex underneath you, you can try and play something more simple over the top. And vice versa works really nicely as well. If the chord changes are very static, that's when it can be a good time to try out some other harmonic devices over the top. And then to finish off here, you can see he's taking the idea of these 3 notes stepping up in a repeated way that we had in the previous phrase. So if we put it all together, going into this D minor chord here, we've got this. Step down. Now these final 8 measures, they're not in our typical form of Autumn Leaves. So this is like a specific arrangement for the recording. Basically they're going into like a D minor vamp for 8 measures. But it's really interesting to hear Paul Desmond play over a vamp like this. Check out what he does. So first of all, we've got this A, which is kind of resolving this phrase from the end of the chorus, then a little bit of a rest break, and then we're launching up these notes here, which are a G major arpeggio. Now that G major arpeggio is really turning this D minor into like a Dorian sound, and it's all because of these B naturals here. Because we've got that G major triad over a D minor chord, we're hitting those higher extensions of the 11th and the 13th. Now this approach works really well on vamps. Because we've just got a static chord of D minor, you can start to explore other structures within, say, the Dorian scale, and one of those is a G major arpeggio. Then we've got this nice repeating Fs with a grace note from the E. The easiest way to do this is to play your high F with the front F key and to put your third finger down, and that will turn your high front F into an E, and then you just have to release that third finger. Then he's bringing things back down, these notes basically just from the D minor pentatonic, before this falling phrase here, landing us on our chord tone again of G minor. Now moving on to the Stan Getz version, this is from the album Chamber Music by the Stan Getz Quintet and was recorded in 1952. Now the extract I have here, this is actually the alternative take, and this is like the last chorus of his solo before the track ends. So you can hear it's got like a halftime ballad feel to it with the bass walking in 2. Check out just this first phrase here. This is just a great piece of language. So what we've got here is 2, 3, 5, 7, 2, 3. You can also think of this as almost like a B flat major 7 up the top here, B flat D F A. Those are the 4 chord tones of B flat major 7, which is starting on the A and running up the chord tones of a B flat major 7 chord. That always works nicely when you're on a G minor 7 chord. It's a really flexible sound and you can change the rhythm loads. It doesn't have to be in this set rhythm. Then after that we get this phrase and immediately we're outside with this sharp 9. So this E flat creates this sound of this sharp 9 sound, and we're using kind of an altered sound here because we've also got the flat 9, the D flat. So we've got this sharp 9, flat 9, sharp 9, and then a bit of a pattern coming down before resolving nicely onto the third, and that's what's so important. You can go really crazy on dominant 7th chords, you can play really outside even on what sounds like a gentle ballad. If you resolve it nicely, then you can put quite a lot of tension on these dominant chords, and that's exactly what he's doing. Outside, and then back in. And then again, another really nice melodic shape. Now it looks like we're landing on the sharp 11 here of the B flat major 7 chord, but he resolves it by almost turning into like an enclosure of this D here, where we step below the D and then we land on the D. So we get this kind of almost targeting of the D. And then you'll hear how he's hinting at the melody here. These notes come from the melody. And then this phrase here, we've got another classic piece of language. This is like the classic Crimea River lick. And he's playing that starting from the sharp 9. It's a very classic piece of jazz language where you have sharp 9, flat 13, 3, sharp 9, flat 9. Then he extends it. Now normally you'd expect it to resolve to the 5, but what Stan Getz does is we have, but he goes up to the major 7 on the minor chord, which is really modern. Yeah, check out this phrase, it's amazing. Now these aren't exactly quintuplets, but he's basically stretching out the phrase and he's heading towards this F here, which is the third, of course, of D minor. So we've got this altered phrase on the A7, this unusual resolution to the major 7 and the 6 on the D minor chord, which is quite a kind of strident sound, but then he steps it up and resolves all of that tension with a nice long F, the third of D minor. And then after this complex phrase, he then simplifies things down, and again he's hinting at the melody with this phrase here. Nice bit of space. And then we have this blistering phrase up, and this similar phrase to what we had with Paul Desmond, with those repeated notes where we're stepping down. Yeah, check out one more time. And as ever, it's a really nice balance. After this blistering phrase, we then just chill out for a whole measure where we're just playing 3 notes and a really long held D. And these doubled notes come back again here all the way through. Check it out. And then we've got another octave jump before that kind of smoother moving down. Now moving into the B section here, again we're kind of hinting at the melody in that the melody is playing E's at this point when you play in this key, but we're dancing around it. What we've got is a classic enclosure here. So we've got this E, and then we're going up to the F, D sharp, E, and we've got this, and then he repeats that again here on the A7 chord. And this idea, this motif keeps coming back. We get it again here on the A minor chord, and then again here. And it even continues here, although now it's diatonic. We don't have just a semitone apart, it's just moving around scale tones. And this is a similarity between Stan Getz and Paul Desmond, is they'll often take little fragments of ideas and repeat them and change them and move them through the chords. So we'll check it out, let's play it from here. And then even this phrase here, it's kind of a development of the idea of moving around. It's just we're now speeding up and using more notes. It's like a jazz turn. And again here, this is very much like the melody it's hinting at, with another idea of like an enclosure, but now we've got these 16th notes instead. Yeah, check it out. Now things break down a bit here. Just playing the melody. Solo sax for a bit. Now notice here on this phrase again, he's not playing up and down all these changes, he's just playing the melody and letting that F carry on through. Now there aren't actually any chords going on underneath him, but he's just stating the melody really simply here, just kind of bringing things to a close. And then we've got from here. Yeah, amazing. Right at the end here, we've got what you would think would be the most wrong note possible to play, an A flat or a G sharp on an A7 chord. Like, why does that work? If I play this separately, it just sounds completely wrong. But again, it's that thing of the blues, just like with Paul Desmond, in a similar place actually towards the end of the tune, where we have that A flat. That time it was on the E half diminished chord. Here we've got it on the E7 chord, but it's still in the overall place of this minor 2-5-1 heading to D minor. And so these notes here, all of these notes are just pure D minor blues scale. And so that's why you can play notes that seem impossible to play, like an A flat on an A7 chord. It's because the wider context is the blues. All right, so that's a walkthrough of those two amazing solos. I would say if you're fairly newer to improvising, start with looking at some of the phrases on the Paul Desmond solo. If you're a little bit more advanced, you can take some of these more sophisticated harmonic ideas from Stan Getz. But both these recordings are just amazing to listen to, so I'd really recommend checking them out. Remember, you can get the free PDF for alto and tenor sax for both of these parts in the original key, and premium members, you've got all of these transposed into the standard key that you normally play Autumn Leaves in as well. And don't forget to check out everything else we have at Online Sax Academy. When you do become a member, you'll get access to absolutely everything on the site, not only this lesson, but all the other courses and lessons we have there. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below, and I'll see you guys soon in the next one.